What is the best board in Mario Party history? This answer will vary depending on, let's be real, the age of the person you ask. Western Land, Koopa's Tycoon Town, maybe you'll get a weirdo who throws out Blooper Beach. But if you ask me, King Boo's Haunted Hideaway from Mario Party 8 might just be my favorite for one simple reason. It is completely different every time you play. With this board alone, you can play a near infinite number of games and still capture that magical first time feel. There's only one problem. It also kinda sucks. So, in this third installment in my ongoing journey to create the perfect Mario Party game, I am going to create a new board that fixes every problem with the best board in Mario Party history. Richard, hit that intro. Now, I'll admit, I have a lot of nostalgia for Mario Party 8. It was one of the first games I ever really played, and I spent literal hours, probably several days of my life in King Boo's Haunted Hideaway and Koopa's Tycoon Town. But for those who are less familiar, I can do a little recap. Maybe you're an older fan who was scared away by all the Waggle games, or you're a young'un who wasn't playing the franchise. Richard, I think you made a typo. This says that Mario Party 8 came out 19 years ago. I mean, what do you mean that's not a typo? Okay, I can recover from this. King Boo's Haunted Hideaway. If you couldn't tell by the name, this board is set in a haunted house. And, as I alluded to in the beginning, the layout is randomly generated every time you play. The board is made up of 12 rooms. One is the starting area, one contains the star, one contains a pitfall, and everything else is chosen from a set of pre-made space rooms. You have no map at the start, so your goal is to travel through the mansion to be the first to find the star. If you happen to find the pitfall room, you're sent back to the beginning. And if you find the star and have enough money, then everyone is warped back outside, the mansion re-randomizes, your map is cleared, and the whole thing starts over again. Now, while I love this concept in theory, there is one glaring issue. It's basically 100% luck. Because your map gets cleared and the board is completely random every time a star is collected, the game essentially comes down to making a blind guess at the first fork in the road and hoping for the best. Aside from holding onto a Springo candy in case the person in front of you finds the pitfall, there's really not a lot of strategy, which, for some people can still be fun. But if you've seen the first episodes in this series, you'll know that I want these boards to constantly give you a sense of agency and control so you feel like an active participant in the game. So today, I'm going to create a new board inspired by these same concepts, but with a few big tweaks to make it better, and a whole lot of math to justify my choices. So with that, I give you all Iggy's Eerie Estate. And yes, I know I established a pattern of alliterative board names in the first two episodes, but Iggy don't play by no rules. As an homage to the board that inspired it, this board is also set in a haunted mansion. And my working concept is, and stick with me, Mario Party meets one of those games that was trendy on YouTube for a while where the players aren't allowed to see the board, if you know what I'm talking about, meets, stick with me, Resident Evil. I said stick with me. I want to keep the original ideas of randomly generating boards using preset rooms and slowly uncovering the map from the original, but with one major change. Instead of the star having its own dedicated room, it simply takes the place of a space like any normal board, so it can theoretically be anywhere. And when someone gets the star, you're not warped outside and the map doesn't re-randomize. Instead, the next star will be spawned in a new random room that no player is currently occupying, and Iggy will pop up and give you some sort of cryptic clue or riddle as to where to look next. Something like, if you wish to find the star, you must beat your friend with a crowbar. And then you have to remember that there was a crowbar in the garage, and that's where the star is. Probably not that one, though. Turns out I'm not good at coming up with riddles. But, I don't know. Iggy said so, so come here, Richard. So, the challenge and the sort of game within the game with this board is learning the layout of the mansion so you can correctly guess the new location based on the riddle and finding the quickest route to get there. And this also serves a double purpose of keeping you engaged on other players' turns. If they're in a different part of the mansion than you, you're still going to want to pay attention to learn the layout. Unlike the original, I think it might be best if this board has no minimap and no ability to look at rooms that no player is currently occupying. So, if you're able to figure out from Iggy's clue that the next star is in the kitchen, say, it's up to you to remember where the kitchen is and how to get back there as quickly as possible. But, of course, we can't make things too easy for you, so let's cast one more stone into this pond. Whenever the star moves, Iggy will also change one thing about the mansion layout. Maybe he rotates a room, swaps two of the rooms, changes all the spaces in a room to red, something to shake things up. So the whole mansion isn't completely changed every time, it's slowly evolving throughout the game. So you might think you know the fastest way to get back to the library, only to find that your path is now blocked, forcing you to improvise. Hopefully this will keep things fresh as the game goes on. I think all of this will hopefully create a very new experience from any other Mario Party board, forcing you to learn the layout like those blind games, and slowly learning the fastest ways to trek back and forth across the mansion, like Resident Evil. See, you stuck with me, and I didn't lead you astray. But while this concept is all well and good, I'm not here to be a simple ideas guy. I want to figure out how we can make this actually work. So, Nintendo, if you're watching, you're welcome, because I'm about to do a whole lot of work for you. So, the first challenge is to figure out how these rooms should be generated. King Boo's Haunted Hideaway was actually very small compared to a lot of other Mario Party boards, with only 9 rooms making up the traversable part of the house. Now, for the way that board was designed, completely re-randomizing every time, that makes sense. I mean, don't make a massive map if it's just going to get scrapped every few turns. However, for this board concept to work, it needs to be a bit bigger, about the same size as a regular Mario Party board to give players room to explore. So, let's start with the basics. Since Mario Party games are typically only 20 to 25 turns long, I don't want players wandering aimlessly around for half the game. I want them to find the first star and start getting clues, probably in only 3 to 4 turns. We've established in previous videos that this game will be using a 10-sided die, meaning that players will move an average of 5.5 spaces a turn. That means that the star should spawn an average of 19.25 spaces from the start. So with that information, we can start to get an idea of how large rooms should be. If we make each room contain 6 to 7 spaces, then the star should be placed in a room 3 rooms away from the entrance. And we determined in a previous video that an ideal Mario Party board should have around 85 spaces. So at an average of 6.5 spaces per room, that means that this board should have 13 total rooms. One more than the original, but really 4 more because every room will be traversable. See, that math wasn't too bad. And don't worry, it's about to get way worse. We know that we want to have 13 total rooms, but these rooms can't just be arranged all willy-nilly, or else you might end up with rooms that are off in the void that you can't get to. I'm not trying to trek out to the shed to get a star. So you might think we can just implement a rule that says that every square needs to be touching, but we still run into a problem. Every Mario Party board, or at least all the good ones, are built as a loop. There are no dead ends. Well, except for King Boo's Haunted Hideaway, which did have dead ends, but we've already talked about why that's not so great. So I want to add in a constraint to this room generation process that says that every room must be adjacent to at least 2 other rooms. There has to be an entrance and an exit. Now, technically, we could end here. This ensures that every board is fully accessible and you won't get stuck. But it doesn't ensure that every board will be particularly interesting. You might get something that's just a big loop, for instance, which kind of defeats the purpose of learning the map and different routes. So I'm going to add in one more constraint. Of the 13 rooms, at least 7, so more than half, must be adjacent to at least 3 other rooms. That way, we can include branching paths and give players choices. So, to recap, 13 rooms, everyone must be adjacent to at least 2, and more than half must be adjacent to at least 3. This will ensure that the randomly generated mansion is fully traversable and with no dead ends, and gives you options for what paths to take. But let's talk about paths. We know how these 13 rooms should be arranged, but what about the spaces within those rooms? I could just take the easy way out and just connect everything up in a grid so you can go any direction you want. But there are a few issues with that approach. One, it'll make traversing the mansion way too easy. You won't need to learn any paths, you can just Pythagoras your way over. And 2, as a lot of you pointed out in the last video, having a million branches that constantly force you to stop and pick a direction can really slow down the pace of a game. So to fix this, we need to make it even more complicated. Each room will be randomly assigned one of 4 preset patterns: a straight line, an L, a T, or a cross, rotated any which way. What you'll most likely end up with is a random jumbled mess of paths that don't connect to each other. So next, the game will look for any wall where a path comes in, but not out the other side. If the room with the unconnected path is a T or a cross, it will simply delete the extra path. If it's a line or an L though, it can't delete that path or else you'd still have a dead end. So instead, the next room will have a new path added to accept it. This ensures that every path leads somewhere without having 99% of the inner rooms just turn into crosses anyway. But are we done yet? Well, if you take a gander at the amount of time left in this video, I think you can guess. No, of course we're not done! There could still be cases where you have disconnected loops that remain inaccessible. So to account for this, the game will select the entrance point along the outside and attempt to draw a line from the entrance point to every other room on the board. If there are any rooms or sections that it cannot get to, it will add in 2 paths to connect them: an entrance and an exit. Now the whole board should be completely contiguous and accessible, except for one remaining issue. In order for this system to work, you need to be able to move in any direction. Normally in Mario Party, all paths are one way, but here that could result in areas that you can't get into or parts of the mansion that you can enter but never leave. And this is Iggy's Eerie Estate, not Iggy's Hotel California. Now, yes, you could technically add in more constraints to ensure that this doesn't happen, but the math required to do so is way more complicated than you think. No, like literally, you have absolutely no idea how much more complicated it is. Like requiring a PhD in advanced graph theory levels of complicated. I ain't doing that. So to compromise, I'm introducing a Mario Party first. In this board, you can move in any direction you want, but you have to fully commit to one at the start of your turn. You can't just like go back and forth to basically pick whatever space you want to land on. Not only does this make the generation a lot easier, but I think it will ultimately make the game more fun and make getting around more strategic and less annoying. So now we know how to generate the room layout and the pathing, but there's still one thing left. What about the actual spaces themselves? Well, the original King Boo's Haunted Hideaway used preset tiles, and I could do that, but that seems like a lot of work, so let's work smarter and not harder. In the first video, we found that an optimal board will have exactly 58.74% blue spaces, 10.23% red, 25.11% green, and 5.92% special. So, after the game has generated the mansion layout and all the spaces, it will tally up the total number of spaces, which will vary depending on the room types, and then randomly generate these spaces based on these exact proportions, rounding to the nearest whole number when necessary. So, say there are a total of 85 spaces. It will randomly make 8 of them red, 19 green, 3 Bowser, 2 DK, and the rest blue. But if all the green spaces are randomly generated, then what do they do, I hear you asking, thinking you've caught me slipping, but no! Have you not realized yet? I've thought of everything this time. Except for the things that I inevitably have not thought about. Well, when each room is generated, it is given a theme. This theme determines 2 things: the decor of that room and the effects of the green spaces within. Things like a cooking mini game for the kitchen, some sort of gambling thing for the game room, stuff like that. So let me know in the comments any ideas you have for room types and what the green spaces would do in there. Let's make this a collaborative effort this time. And don't worry, I'm definitely not just outsourcing this part because this video ended up way longer than I thought. I mean, can you believe I thought I could do these last 2 in one video? Amateur. So, once all the spaces are laid out, the game is nearly ready to go. The only thing left is to throw in 2 to 3 shops between spaces in select rooms, ensuring that one is exactly 2 rooms away from the start to ensure that people can actually get items early on. And pick a space that's 19 to 21 spaces away from the start to become the star space. And you're ready to go. With this formula, the game should be able to generate a near infinite number of completely unique and interesting Mario Party boards. And thus, the promise of this series has been fulfilled. I have created not just the perfect Mario Party board, but every perfect Mario Party board. And so, to recap, here's how Iggy's Eerie Estate works. The game will randomly generate a board made up of 13 rooms, using a series of constraints to ensure that the whole thing is accessible. You have to travel around the house, learning the map as you go, to find the star. Once you do, it will randomly warp to an unoccupied room, Iggy will give you a cryptic riddle as to where it is, and you have to go and find it. Every time the star moves, some small aspect of the house will change, forcing you to constantly adapt your strategy. And, since I didn't mention it yet, the special Iggy's Wand item that I've included in all of these will instantly move the star and change some part of the mansion, sort of like a get out of jail free card if someone's about to find the star, or if you know that it's miles away from you. But they're pretty expensive, so people won't constantly abuse it. A complicated board design, to be sure, but ultimately, I think it'll be a lot of fun. And to everyone who's planning on making a super cool fan game based on these board concepts, I'm real sorry for this one. So, what do you think? Do you like it? Can you think of any ways to improve it? Let me know in the comments down below, as well as what Koopaling you'd like me to tackle next. We got 3 down, only 4 to go. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to resume my deep research into graph theory to figure out how many possible board configurations this could make to include in the thumbnail with me looking at it like this. And if the thumbnail didn't look like that, you know that I failed, and if you can solve this problem, please let me know. Help me. And a massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, including Alakazam, Aspa102, Big Dog Tie for to Win, Captain Kirby, Sidian, Sherry and Mark, The Boss Killer 94, Tricks of Crows, and someone who has named themselves, "Did you know that the character limit on the Patreon name is very high?" Well, it's high enough in fact that I could name myself M. Thanks, M.